Well, we're almost into October, and guess which two teams have the lowest national championship odds? You guessed it, last year's national championship teams, Alabama and Clemson. The big question now, though, as far as this week is concerned, was whether Clemson will remain at the top after their trip to Blacksburg on Saturday night. We'll take a look at that huge ACC matchup and all the other key games for the upcoming weekend with the latest key injuries, odds, trends, and picks as the OFN on PSN starts now. Thanks for tuning in to the Ourlads Football Radio Network as we preview Week 5 in college football. And it is the 29th of September, 2017. I'm your host, Greg DePalma. So I got a lot to cover in a short period of time. We're going to get right to it. And last night, Texas able to hold off Iowa State. Not a pretty game, but a win's a win, especially on the road. And Texas will be a very formidable team to keep an eye on in the next couple of years. There's absolutely no question about that. Wouldn't be surprised if they were ranked in the top, I don't know, maybe 15 next year. And I think they're going to really play better as the season goes on. It wasn't a pretty effort, but Iowa State's a better team, and Tom Herman's a good coach. They've got some good talent there, so they're going to be just fine. Okay, so tonight, coming up in a little while, we've got Miami at Duke. Now, this is a real big game in the ACC. You've got Miami, of course, playing their first game last week over Toledo since the opening game against, Bethune-Cookman. And they were able to pull ahead of Toledo 52-30, probably, maybe the best team in the MAC. So that's a good win. Quarterback Malik Rozier is starting to develop. You also have another young quarterback for Duke, Daniel Jones. We've talked about him before. Both teams have good rushing attacks. Mark Walton from Miami, Sean Wilson, and Britton Brown for Duke. They've combined for 674 and 7 touchdowns. Interesting to note in this series, Miami has won 3 straight up and against the spread over the last 3 versus Duke. And Miami has actually won 7 straight games dating back to last season, including 6-0 against the spread. So Mark Richt has this program running nicely. We knew that would happen, and this is just the beginning. I mean, they don't have a team to win a national championship this year, but give them a couple more years. I give it 2 to 3 more years, and this team is going to be back into the top 10, maybe even top 5, because Mark Richt knows what he's doing. As far as Detroit, Cutcliffe knows what he's doing, of course, as well. And this, I think I've said this before, I think this is Duke's best team since the 2013 ACC championship team. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but especially that Jones and the running game and just the overall talent seems to be a little bit better. They destroyed Northwestern at home. Baylor, I know what they are, but still, they beat Baylor. They beat North Carolina. They're 4-0 this year, straight up, 3-0 against the spread. So both teams are undefeated straight up and against the spread this year. By the way, Duke is 3-1 straight up. 4-0 against the spread the last 4 as a home dog. And that includes the 41-17 win over Northwestern on September 9th as a 2-point dog. So to me, look, you got conflicting trends, so I'm throwing that out the door. Fact is, this is going to be a real good football game. This can go either way, and I have said this many times. Games that can go either way, 90% of the time, I'm going to take the money line if it's worth it. Definitely the points, depending on where it is. And with Miami as a 6-point road favorite here, I'm going to go ahead and take Duke to a 2-1 money line. I just think you can flip a coin in this one. I mean, I understand why Miami's a favorite. They should be a slight favorite, and I get that. But this is also the first road start for this young quarterback from Miami. So that's a difference right there. And maybe that little bit of difference is what Duke can help to their advantage in getting the job done. And by the way, also, don't forget what happened in the NFL. We talked about it a lot on the NFL shows over the past week. When Miami and Tampa Bay, they had the whole hurricane thing, and they had the delay. They came out that first game, and they won. And so we were all impressed by their wins. But then the very next week, Miami gets destroyed by the Jets. Tampa Bay gets destroyed by Minnesota. Well, this is the second week for Miami. So we have all that built up adrenaline, and you want to play, and you want to play for you and your family and your friends in the program, and you go out and you get the win. What happens the second game? Now, the good thing is, though, for Miami is that that's a MAC game. This is a big ACC game, so it's a nationally televised game. Also, it's a week after maybe getting some of the rust off. So there's a lot of pros and cons there, no question about it. All right, also tonight, a couple other games that really not many people will pay attention to. Nebraska, Illinois, the home team in the series has won 4 straight over the 4. Actually, they've only played 4 years as Big Ten rivals, and the home teams won them all. So maybe Nebraska might be in trouble tonight, and I wouldn't be surprised if they were. I mean, Illinois' strength is their defense because they really don't have much on offense. Nebraska, boy, Tanner Lee just keeps throwing picks. Uh, Nebraska was actually lucky to beat Rutgers last week. So Illinois, look, I don't think look, I don't think Illinois is better than Rutgers. I tell you, I don't think they are. They're not very good, Illinois, but they are at home, so they got that advantage to them. Let's just put it this way: no way would I touch Nebraska. I don't trust them. BYU, Utah State, big rivals going up against each other. Not a surprise that everybody is picking Utah State to win this game. Hogue, the quarterback for BYU, replacing Mangum, just doesn't look good, doesn't look ready. They really miss Williams and his 1,300 yards rushing. They're 0-3 versus FBS teams, BYU, this year by an 86-19 margin. Now, it's also the first road game of the season. Utah State coming off their best win of the season, winning 61-10 over San Jose State. They got the quarterback edge with Kent Myers. BYU has won 5 out of 6 in this series, and they've won it convincingly, 79-38 combined in those 2 games. BYU is also 6-0, straight up, 5-1 against the spread. Their last 6 as away favorites. So, but that, as I just mentioned, changed from a 3-point favorite to a 1-point dog in the last 24 hours. I'm going to take Utah State in that game. I think it's time for Utah State to win the game. This is just not a good BYU team. It's just not. They got nothing on offense, and take away Mangum. And Mangum was struggling. And now this whole kid, I mean, maybe a little extra practice time, who knows, but I don't see it. I think Utah State really wants this one bad, so I'll take Utah State tonight minus the 1. Now, another spread that has moved recently is USC and Washington State. We talked the last few days about the fact that I was surprised USC was a 3.5-point favorite in this game, and sure enough, the line has moved up to 5.5. So I was starting to think, okay, well, in my upsets, they have to be 6 points or more. I always get the half point, so I can get a plus 180 on the money line here. Now that becomes a little interesting because even when it was 3.5, I said the other day, look, I thought the line was a little bit weird, but I also wasn't sure about what to think of this game. I mean, Darnold does not look good. USC's 1-3 against the spread this year. And Falk is having a big year, completing 77% of his passes, 14 touchdowns, 1 pick. They're the home team. So it's, big atmosphere. And everybody's going to be real excited about this game in Pullman. And by the way, USC has won 5 straight in Pullman, including the last 3 by a 163-33 margin. Now, they haven't played in this rivalry the last few years. And by the way, Washington State, their best defender, Peyton Puller's out for the year. That's a big blow, the heart and soul of the defense. So that's going to be a big miss for Washington State, no question about it. Look, USC has just been struggling. What are you going to say? Struggled against Western Michigan. Struggled against Texas, almost lost that game. Struggled again last week against Cal. And now I think Washington State came into this year a better team than Cal. They just did. So I tell you what, USC, if you take a look, and they're my pick, one of my picks, no question. I've said it all year to be in the national championship game. But look, I have to admit, I mean, they're not looking good right now. And part of me is saying maybe it's time to take USC off. Now, I kept them on in my futures report that we posted last night, this morning. But maybe it's time. And maybe this is the game that does it. But, look, they lose this game, they could still win the national championship. Maybe the best thing that they can do is lose the game. I don't know. If you take a look at their schedule, too, it's not a difficult schedule. It really isn't. They don't play Washington, okay? They also do not have to play Stanford anymore, I should say, because they just beat Stanford and they got them at home. UCLA, come on. I mean, if you're trying to win a national championship, you shouldn't be worrying about UCLA at home. I think we saw with the Colorado Washington game last week that they shouldn't have to worry about Colorado either, as long as they're playing, good football and championship type football. So unless there's I don't know, expectation issue with Clay Helton, he's not the right guy when it's all said and done. Sam Darnold is too young; he can't handle the expectations. Then you know what? If you look at it, this game tonight is one of, I would say, their two toughest games left the entire season, unless they go to the Pac-12 championship game and face Washington. That's right, because their next toughest game could be against Notre Dame on the road. I mean, they get Utah home, and they get UCLA home, and the other road games Colorado. That's it. So USC can lose this game and still win the national championship. Um, I'll go ahead and take Washington State. Why not? I mean, I'll take the plus 180. I know it's conflicting with my futures play, but look, I don't think it matters. I don't. You can lose nowadays and still win the national championship. So I'm not. And look, it's also, as I said last week, it's not always about saying, "Oh, I think this team's going to win the game definitely." So I'm picking this game outright. It's not always about that. It's about just saying, "Hey, I can get almost 2-to-1 odds on this. I'll roll the dice on it. If I get it, awesome. If I don't, not a big deal. All I got to do is hit, 50% sometimes, or 40, 35% of my money line plays, and I'm ahead. So I'll go ahead and take Washington State plus 180, and think that, unless USC turns things around, and they may have to play their best game of the season. It could happen. Don't forget Alabama played their best game of the season last week. Nobody saw that coming. I mean, everybody thought Alabama would win, but they were an 18, 19-point favorite, and they won by 60. So these teams are talented. USC is more than enough talent in that team that if they came to play, they're definitely winning and covering that game. But I'll go ahead, take Washington State, night game, Friday night, and say that they're able to pull it out. Because, by the way, they have got, this team has struggled. If you've been following Washington State, you'll know that they have struggled for a few years out of the gate. They lost to Portland State. Actually, if you look at it, 2014, they lost to Rutgers and Nevada to start the season. 2015, they lost to Portland State to start the season. Last year, they lost to Eastern Washington to start the season. What have they done this year? 4-0. All right. So they've got a little bit of momentum going, and this is just a huge game for them. And even though it's his sixth year, this would be a defining signature win for Mike Leach at Washington State. So I'll take the Cougars plus the 180. Okay, Northwestern and Wisconsin as we move to tomorrow's games. And even though I added Wisconsin in my futures at 33-1 to win a national championship, I would stay away from this game. It's 16. Northwestern had a bad game against Duke, but I'm willing to wipe that one out because they're just too good of a team to have played that poorly. That's the only really bad, that's the only loss they've had so far. But here's what's interesting for Northwestern in this series, or overall, I should say, for them. They're 7-2 straight up. 8-1 against the spread. Their last 9 as a road dog. So Fitzgerald, who I really love as a head coach, can get this team up in these spots. These two teams usually play tough, and Wisconsin is relying on younger guys. I mean, Hornibrook is having a very good season. 58% completion percentage last year, 9-7 TD to interception ratio. This year, 70%, 8-1. TD to interception ratio. That's what you want to see from a young kid. And freshman Jordan Taylor has 438 and 5 touchdowns with an 8.2 rushing average. Wisconsin's a better team. They're at home. They're favored by 16, but I would stay away from that one. And I would just avoid it. And to tell you the truth, I guess if I had to take it, I might take Northwestern in that one. I'm not going to, but I might. This is a game that might be closer than you think. Now, I'm going to go ahead and take a crazy upset here, but once again, I'm just playing the odds, and why not play the odds with a team that has been one of my darling teams of the year? I say this every year. There's always about 3 or 4 of these teams. I never know which team it's going to be. Usually, I got on the positive side, and then a few on the negative side the negative where I just, no matter what I do, no matter what I say, I'm wrong. And on the opposite side, that, hey, every time I keep taking them, they keep doing nice things for me. They keep coming through for me. One of those teams is New Mexico State. And the Aggies are having, I think, well, look, I've been around, they have not been to a bowl since I've been alive. That's a long time. And that means that I haven't seen this team really very much play this good. So that's why I don't think I'm going crazy when I say I think this is the best New Mexico State team that I've ever seen. Now, if you take a look at what they've done so far, they've actually been very consistent this year. They lost only by 6 at Arizona State as a 26-point road dog. They beat rival New Mexico on the road. They only lost by 3 at home to Troy as a 9-point dog, and they destroyed UTEP last week. They're 4-0 against the spread. You might even be wondering why they're only a 17-point favorite, dog on the road against an SEC team like Arkansas. But yes, Arkansas is struggling, no question. They got to get things going. How will they? How do they play after the way that they lost last week? I mean, last week's game was a really tough one. They just keep finding ways to lose these close games to Texas A&M. They did it again. They just haven't played well. They were lackluster against TCU. We know TCU is better than people thought. I mean, we knew TCU was going to be good, but hey, TCU handled Arkansas pretty well on the road, and they just beat Oklahoma State on the road. So they're even better than we thought. But still, things aren't going. Look, I don't think it's time to panic at Arkansas. It would be if they lost this game, but I don't think it's time for that. But what I am going to do is to say, you know what? I've seen it. We saw it last week with these teams from Conference USA, or even sometimes the Sun Belt. We saw it last year with Troy and Clemson. You just get these situations sometimes where these teams in these smaller conferences, they go on the road to these big schools and they give them a game. Louisiana Tech almost beat South Carolina last week. I think New Mexico State, the way they're playing compared to the way Arkansas is playing, can give them a game. So now, will they win? Probably not, but let's not forget this. Okay, this is important. South Alabama from the Sun Belt went to Mississippi State last year as a 28-point dog and won. Okay, I'm just saying. So I'll take New Mexico State 6-1 on the money line plus the 17, and that'll be my crazy money line play of the day. Maryland at Minnesota, and Minnesota is another team that I'm really starting to feel good about. I've taken them the last couple of games. They've covered both games. They've been very convincing in doing so. They've won the 3 games this year by 99-24 margin. They beat Maryland last year 31-10 in their first ever Big Ten matchup on the road. Connor Rhoda is not a big-time quarterback, but he actually averages 9.9 yards per attempt, thanks to wide receiver Tyler Johnson, who averages 23.5 yards per reception. So he's the big play guy for Minnesota. They want to run the ball. They're still a running team, but they've got, it's almost like, you see at the Navy or Army or Georgia Tech when they want to run the ball and then they have that big play guy. That's what's going on with Minnesota right now, and it's working. And PJ Fleck knows how to coach. I'm taking Minnesota here because Maryland is, these two teams are going in opposite directions. Maryland, boy, the quarterback situation is an absolute travesty. I have never seen a program in all of my life, in the past 5 or 6 years, that has dealt with more quarterback injuries than Maryland. I just haven't. They come out of the gates, they beat Texas, they lose their quarterback who has a big game, Pegram. They turn it over to Hill, and they figure, okay, that's fine. This guy is even a better recruit, so we're going to be just fine. Well, what happens? Casey Hill gets injured last week against Central Florida, and they have to play their 4th-string quarterback because their 3rd-string quarterback's been out with a foot injury, Caleb Henderson. So Max Bortenschlager will get the start for Maryland in the game against Minnesota. So if Minnesota is kind of like, well, we got this one, we got nothing to worry about, then sure, I guess maybe this will be closer than people think. Plus they had a week off to prepare, so maybe they're kind of asleep at the wheel. It could happen. But if they come prepared, Minnesota, that one shouldn't be close. So I'll take the Gophers minus the 12.5. Vandy and Florida, another game at noontime, and the Gators are a 9-point favorite, and they just keep getting lucky with these last-second wins. They've won their last 2 on the final play. beating some mediocre teams, Kentucky and Tennessee. Sure, Vanderbilt's another mediocre team, and I don't know what I don't know what to say regarding what happened last week. I just don't. But 78 yards total offense. So if they play like that, of course, take Florida, give them 9. But I'm going to wipe that one out, as we always do. I'm willing to wipe out a game and say that Vandy will not play like that again this week. And Florida, maybe they're even overdue for just not getting away with what they've gotten away with the last couple of weeks. But you know what? Tennessee went through this, remember, early last year, and they kept winning these close games, and we knew they weren't that good, and it caught up to them eventually. So maybe Florida will let this ride for a while, and that's possible. Luke Del Rio takes over at quarterback. Not that he's anything great, but he is probably better than what they have right now, which isn't saying a whole lot. I still think Shermer's probably better, the quarterback for Vandy. And keep in mind that the 2 star players are still out for Florida, Callaway and Scarlett. So that eventually you think that would come up and hurt them. Florida has won 3 straight versus Vandy, including the last 2 by just 22-13. Vandy covering both games as a 12 and 21 point dog. They're getting 9. I'll take the money line in this one too. I think Florida is definitely vulnerable. So Vandy 3-1 money line plus the 9. I'll go with the Commodores in that one. Move on to a 1 o'clock game, Central Michigan and Boston College, and some injuries in this game to note. Now, Central Michigan's Willis is the receiver, the number 1 receiver, has been out the last couple of weeks, and that definitely hurts them, no question. He did play in the first 2 games. They won the first 2 games, but he's been out the last couple of games, and Central Michigan just hasn't been the same team. Matter of fact, if you take a look at the exact results, they beat Rhode Island, they beat Kansas, but then they get crushed by Syracuse and crushed by Miami of Ohio in the 2 games without Willis. And they've also been without their top tight end Conklin, who's been out all year with a foot injury. So both guys are out. That's big. Those are big losses for Central Michigan. And by the way, Central Michigan 2-7. Straight up and against the spread, their last 9 versus FBS teams. They're getting 10.5 in this one. But the whole Boston College thing, I mean, I'm not getting why Boston College, to tell you the truth, should be 10.5 point favorite over anybody right now. Okay, they had a nice little road win against Northern Illinois to start the season. They got crushed by Wake, crushed by Notre Dame, crushed by Clemson. They got a ton of injuries along the offensive line, a ton. The quarterback situation is bad. Their top defender is out. Their linebacker. There's just a lot of injuries for both teams, so I think it kind of evens up in that way. And I don't think Central Michigan is all that much I mean, talent-wise, they've actually look at it. They've actually been pretty much on par with Boston College the last few years. So this is, to me, this is not a bad play to take Central Michigan in the money line in a game that, once again, I could see going either way. So I'll probably take the money line in this one, 3-1 with the Chippewas and plus 11 on the point spread. All right, let's move on and stick. Let's see. No, I tell you what. Let's jump to the 3:30 starts. And Georgia and Tennessee. Georgia's an 8-point favorite. Another team we added to our futures, and why not? If you take a look at the Georgia situation, their schedule really is nice. And I kind of wanted to wait just that one game against Mississippi State before I did take Georgia, and it paid off because the odds didn't move up that much. So I'm still in a good situation there. I think they're like 14-1, 12 or 14-1. I forget what it is. Now look. If you look at their schedule, their toughest road game is definitely a game that maybe they lose, maybe at Auburn. Okay, even though I still don't believe in Stidham yet, but maybe they lose. Okay, they also have to play at Georgia Tech, at Tennessee, at Vandy. Fine. Then they play the neutral game against Florida. But the home games they should win: Missouri, South Carolina, Kentucky. But you don't see an Alabama in there. You don't see an LSU in there. Okay. There are no major stumbling blocks for Georgia that says to me that they won't win this division and will lose more than one game. So if they just end up in the SEC championship game with one loss, they will be able to play in the SEC championship game for a shot at the playoffs. No way does a one-loss Georgia not make the playoffs if they win the SEC. So that's why I went ahead and did it with Georgia. And look, the defense, second year of Kirby Smart, they may not have any superstars on defense, but Bellamy, Carter, good players. But even the quarterback is starting to learn as well as he should as he's playing every game. Of course, I'm talking about true freshman Jake Fromm filling in for Jacob Eason. Nick Chubb is a superstar type back, and maybe he can actually get going. A couple years ago, he was a Heisman guy. So I think Georgia is a very, very nice play. Now, as far as this game, look, I don't like Tennessee. I don't like them at all. I don't like anything of what I've seen from Tennessee so far. They do have John Kelly at running back. I think that's all they have. But Dormady has been pretty weak at quarterback. I just don't like what I see from Tennessee. And last week, they beat Massachusetts by 4. I mean, come on. I mean, again, they beat Florida. I mean, they lost to Florida in that Hail Mary. And again, I don't think Florida is anything. So this is just not a very. I've never been a Butch Jones guy. You know that listening to me for the last several years. 8 points. I don't want to have to give up 8. SEC road game 8. It's a lot. But you know what? I think I might do that. I think I'll take Georgia minus the 8 in this one. I definitely believe they're going to win. And I think they owe Tennessee after losing on the Hail Mary last year to Dobbs at home. Tennessee's also beaten them the last couple of years. With the last 6 in the series decided by 8 or less. So that would be a warning sign to take Tennessee or stay away from the game. I get that. But I'm going to go ahead and take Georgia anyway, minus the 8. Baylor at Kansas State. Now, I think coming into that Oklahoma game, we're all scratching our heads. It's just how bad Baylor was. But then all of a sudden, they had the ball with an opportunity to tie Oklahoma. That's right, the Oklahoma team that was getting all the press from the Ohio State win. And how in the world did that happen? Well, it had to be low scoring, right? Well, no. Zach Smith, who played okay last year, but is not one of these top RG3, even petty quarterbacks that Baylor's had over the recent years. But still, he played okay. And then this year, for some crazy reason, Anu Solomon got the head start job. I guess he was better in practice. But Solomon's terrible, so he's out. And it wasn't the reason that they made the move, but apparently it was more of a decision from Rule to go to Zach Smith. All right, he struggled the first game on the road against Duke. That might happen. But then against Oklahoma, 33 of 50, 463, 4 touchdowns, no picks. Boy, that looks like an old Baylor type quarterback. Now, you do have to keep in mind that Baylor loses one of their top 2 receivers, Chris Platt, for the season. So that is definitely a big blow. They still have Mims, but there is a drop off. So they don't have 2 really good receivers anymore. They just have 1, and there's the drop off. So they're going to need somebody to step up. But Kansas State, it just doesn't look all that great right now this year. Zach Ertz has not developed into the quarterback that Bill Snyder thought that he was going to develop in a couple of years ago. They beat Central Arkansas and Charlotte. Well, who cares? And they scored 7 points against Vanderbilt in their last game. I mean, Ertz is hitting 55% of his passes, and he's the number 1 rusher on the team at 237. So they're not running. They're not passing. They're giving 15.5 in this game. They're 2-6 against the spread. Their last 8 is a home favorite. And the dog in the series with Kansas State has won 3 out of 7 and covered 6 out of 7. So not only will I take Baylor to cover the 16, I'm going to take Baylor to win the game at plus 450 on a money line. And as I said last week, even through all the bad stuff Baylor's been through, that Matt Rule will turn this program around. I have all the confidence in that. And after their performance last week, I feel a lot better too about what I said. Penn State will take on Indiana. They're a heavy favorite, 17.5. No reason to think that they'll have no problem there. Still should be. We'll have to keep an eye on how they play in the game though, because that was just an emotional win against Iowa, so there might be a little bit of a hangover. They do go to Northwestern next week. Navy and Tulsa. Navy favored by 7.5 in that one. This is an important game for both teams in that division. It's an open division. Tulsa coming off the loss to New Mexico, and they just don't look the same though at quarterback. Dane Evans is out. 2 1,000-yard receivers are gone. They're more of a running team only right now. So you got 2 teams that want to run the ball going up against each other in that one. Florida State and Wake Forest also at 3:30. Florida State favored by 7.5. I'm not sure they should be favored by 7.5 over many teams, especially without a 4-0. And now if we would have looked at this game at the beginning of the season, 4-0 against 0-2, okay. All right, that makes sense. Wait, Wake is 4-0. Florida State's 0-2. That doesn't make any sense. But James Blackman, the freshman quarterback, did not look all that great last week against NC State. Wake is playing a lot better than people thought that they would play. Clausen's doing a really nice job building that program since Grobe has left. Florida State's won 5 straight in the series, but the last 2 games have only been decided by a total of 19 points. So Wake has actually played Florida State tough the last couple of years. Can't really say that I'd go with the money line play in this one. But taking 8, you know what? I think I might do that. I really do. I think this is one of those games that Wake really, really wants bad. They smell blood. If they're ever going to beat Florida State, maybe they feel like this is the time to do it, because Florida State, their offensive line's been weak, the running game's weak, freshman quarterback, they're just doing nothing that anybody expected. So I can see this being another low-scoring game, and if Florida State gets some turnovers, maybe they go. That's the reason they cover. But I'll take the 8. Why not? Again, I doubt I'll take the money line, but you'll have to see my picks either later tonight or tomorrow morning when I post them over at primesportsnetwork.com to get the answer for real. But I think I've got enough money line plays. Okay, Eastern, and here's another one. Eastern Michigan, 5-1 dog at Kentucky. I was just talking about some of these, teams from lower conferences and especially Louisiana Tech. Well, you know what? I think Eastern Michigan can cover this game. They're getting 15 against Kentucky, first ever meeting. Creighton and Stoops have done a really good job rebuilding these programs. Both teams are coming off their first loss of the season and excruciatingly tough losses. Eastern Michigan in overtime to Ohio. Kentucky, of course, to Florida in that just crushing blow. But hey, Eastern Michigan, they kind of look up to this game, whereas Kentucky is all right. Eastern Michigan. So I might actually take the money line in this one as well, because if I take enough of these games and money lines that I actually like some of these dogs, again, all I got to do is hit a couple and I'm ahead. I might take Eastern Michigan in the 5-1 pick there against Kentucky, expecting, of course, as I mentioned, a big hangover. And by the way, last year with Kentucky, even though they had a nice season, keep in mind there were a few games that they kind of struggled. They lost to Southern Miss the first game of the season by 9 at home, and that was a game where they were a short favorite, but again, that most people would have expected them to win. So it's and look, they only beat Eastern Kentucky a few weeks ago at home by 11, and they only beat Southern Miss by 7 this year. So look, it's nice what they're doing in Kentucky, but Eastern Michigan is doing pretty good as well. And I think that game could be a close game. Now, Iowa at Michigan State. This is one of my favorite games. Definitely like Iowa plus the 5. Iowa getting absolutely no respect. Not sure why they're getting 5 at all. I mean, the only thing I could think of is that people think this is going to be a hangover game. That's it. Why else would Michigan State be 4.5-point favorite at home against Iowa when Iowa's clearly the better team? So the only way Iowa loses this game is if they just have a major hangover. But here's the deal. They can't afford to. And Kirk Ferentz is a good enough head coach that maybe he gets that through to the team. Because if they really want a chance at getting into the Big Ten championship game, they can't have back-to-back Big Ten losses. I mean, they still got to go to Wisconsin. They still have to host Ohio State. 3 losses, they won't be able to play for the Big Ten championship game with 3. So they have to win this game if they really, unless they plan on beating Wisconsin at Camp Randall later in the year. So I think Iowa should be able to rebound here. The road teams won 3 straight in this series, even though they haven't played since 2015. But by the way, when they played in that game, it was the Big Ten championship game. Michigan State won that thriller, and Iowa's got a little bit of payback here as well. So I'll take Iowa plus the 5. Now, here's a money line I'm contemplating, but I probably won't take. But I'm thinking of definitely taking the 17 at Stanford hosting Arizona State. I think that's a big number. I like that Arizona State coming off the Oregon win. Manny Wilkins is playing better at quarterback. 12-9 touchdown interception ratio last year, 8-0 this year. So they're playing better. Upset over Oregon. I think they can hang in there. I'll take the 17. Notre Dame and Miami of Ohio. Notre Dame's won back-to-back blowouts over BC and Michigan State. Miami of Ohio, we know they're a much improved program. This is just one of those games I'm very intrigued. I'm very interested in seeing. Look, if Notre Dame continues to roll, okay, 21. But I think I get the feeling Miami of Ohio is going to hang in there. I don't know if they can cover. I might take them, but I don't know. I think I just got a little bit of a feeling that game could be a lot closer than people are thinking. All right. Also, a little bit later on at 6 o'clock, Auburn's a 7.5 point favorite against Mississippi State. Now, what are we going to get out of Mississippi State? More like the LSU game or the hangover game against Georgia? Well, 7.5, to tell you the truth, is not a lot. So I'm probably going to go with the Tigers in that one. I still don't think Stidham has done anything to prove much. The last couple of games against Mercer and Missouri, he's thrown one touchdown pass. Now, his completion percentage is better, and they're running the ball, and they play great defense at Auburn. But I don't know. I mean, that's why I'm saying I don't know, because if I have to actually take Auburn and Stidham again, I think I might regret that. Uh, but Auburn should be able to beat Mississippi State by more than a score at home. Let's see, what else do we got? Air Force at New Mexico. No, I like the Lobos in this one. Both teams should be pretty good this year. Air Force has lost a couple of close games to Michigan and San Diego State, so those are good teams, of course. Where New Mexico is coming off a nice road win against Tulsa. The Lobos are 3-2 straight up, 5-0 against the spread in their last 5 versus the Falcons. So I'm going to take the Lobos plus the 3 in that one. I'm also going to jump on Central Florida as a 4-point favorite at home against Memphis. Memphis had the big win against UCLA. Okay, fine. That's not a major surprise, though. But Central Florida, even though these two teams haven't played since 2013, they've owned the series. They've won 9 straight against the Tigers since 2005. And as I've said before, I think the Knights are going to wind up winning the AAC when it's all said and done. If they do, well, they should win this game. And again, it's a short number at 4. Ohio State's favored by 30 against Rutgers. They're 0-3 against the spread in their last 3 games. The Buckeyes. That's why I'm thinking of taking the big 30 there. I also think Rutgers, since they're a lot better this year, they get Janarian Grant back. Because look, if Janarian Grant doesn't play, that's a huge loss for them. Don't ever take Rutgers if you know Janarian Grant's going to wind up missing the game. But I think with Janarian Grant back, that helps their offense out tremendously. Don't like what I've seen out of Ohio State at all this year. That's why they're 0-3 against the spread this year. Plus, Rutgers, maybe they can show a little bit of fight. I mean, in the only 3 games they've ever played against the Buckeyes, they've lost by a 163-24 margin. Texas A&M's an 8.5-point favorite against South Carolina. They are 3-0 the last 3 years as SEC rivals against the Gamecocks, with the Gamecocks covering the last 2, though. But South Carolina has won 3. Texas A&M has won 3 straight since that UCLA loss. I've said repeatedly how much that I felt. Well, I'm a very, I respect what Kevin Sumlin does at Texas A&M. I believe Kevin Sumlin has what it takes to be an NFL head coach one day. What's going on at Texas A&M? Look, I understand why the fans are upset. I get it, but it ain't his fault. Things just aren't going well, and I wish those fans would stop thinking of Texas A&M like they're Texas, because they're not. Maybe 50 years ago, as far as a history of the program, but seriously, when was the last time, besides Johnny Manziel, when someone was coaching, when was the last time Texas A&M was a national championship relevant team? Come on, I mean, please. So anyway. But this is one of those games that you don't want to lose as well. South Carolina's coming off a last-second win against Louisiana Tech. They also had lost the week before against Kentucky. So another good opportunity for Texas A&M. I like Texas A&M in this one. I'll probably give the 8. Kellen Mond, the true freshman, is starting to learn how to play. He had 109 rushing yards last week, and so he's starting to come on. Last 2 games, he's passed for 517 yards. He's got Christian Kirk to work with. He's got Javon Williams to work with. So this is a guy that was 3 of 17 for 27 yards when he had to play in that UCLA game. So he's developing. And they got Armani Watts, who probably is the best player on the field, the safety for the Aggies. Clemson, Virginia Tech. This is the big game, of course, at 8 o'clock. Now, this game I'm going to stay away from because I can easily see either team winning this game. I could see, because Bryant, expecting him to go back on the road again in a big Saturday night game again, this time at Blacksburg, and win again and not make mistakes. I think that's asking a lot. He's starting to throw the ball a little bit better. He's big on the ground, 268, 7 touchdowns. Clemson's won 9 straight games. Their confidence is sky high. They've beaten the Hokies 4 straight. They beat them in the title game last year. I get all that. But the Hokies have covered 7 straight versus FBS teams. They've won 6 out of their last 7. Of course, they're undefeated so far. They got a freshman quarterback of their own in Josh Jackson that's got an 11-1 touchdown to interception ratio. He can also run. And Cam Phillips might be one of the best receivers you haven't heard of yet. The receiver for the Hokies, 34 receptions, 523, and 5 touchdowns. And by the way, they also have a big edge at the kicking game, and that could be critical in a very close game. Greg Hugel's out for the year. He kicked in both championship games for Clemson, so he was clutch, but he's out. So Alex Spence takes over the kicking duties for the Tigers. Joey Sly is an first-team ACC kicker for the Hokies, and I think it's important to reference that in a game that could be close. So I'm not taking this game. I'm not going against Clemson, one of my 4 teams in the postseason. And I also haven't taken them yet in my futures, though, because I kind of, in a way, hope they lose this game because the odds go up, and then I take them. But yeah, this game I think can definitely go either way. Virginia Tech plus 250 on the money line. All right, a few more before we let you go. Oklahoma State favored by 10.5 at Texas Tech. The Red Raiders are going to be my play here. A game that I definitely think that they might be able to catch Oklahoma State in a little bit of a hangover. I don't know if I'm going with the money line, but I'm thinking about it. Oklahoma State, even though they've won 8 straight in this series, Texas Tech has covered 2 out of 3. Nick Shimonek has actually done a really good job since Mahomes left. He's completing 73% of his passes, 11 touchdowns, 1 pick. So there you go. You know, I know it's the whole system at Texas Tech, but Kingsbury is able to find him, and that's what's going on here. But you know what? They came through for us last week as an upset play against Houston. They beat Arizona State. So they're beating good teams. So maybe this is Kingsbury's best team. Could be. You never know. So I'm going to go ahead and take the 11. I don't think I'll take the money line, but I'll have to think about it. Again, hangover reasons only, because Oklahoma State, you know, they could still win a national championship. They beat Oklahoma, and they could just run the table, and there's no reason that they can't run the table. If they run the table, win the Big 12 championship game, they could be in the playoffs, but you can't lose this game. Also, Ole Miss and Alabama. Ole Miss 2-1 straight up, 3-0 against the spread, the last 3 versus the Tide. So maybe the Tide want to get a little bit of 59-0 on Ole Miss this week. The Rebels are 1-8 against the spread their last 9. Look, this is all Ole Miss can play for. They're not going to a bowl this year with the ban. Shea Patterson and A.J. Brown, they're a nice little duo, quarterback receiver. Look, Ole Miss is capable, no question. But I don't know. Even though it's 28, it's a lot of points. Like I said, I just get the feeling that maybe if Alabama can, maybe they destroy Ole Miss in this one. Of course, I'd like to see a close game, but you never know. I'll stay away from this one. Cal at Oregon, another dog I like in this one. Cal plus the 16 at Oregon. Look, again, Oregon lost to Arizona State last week, so if you look at it, they barely beat Nebraska, and they're not playing well. They beat up on Wyoming. That was misleading because Wyoming's no good. And they lost to Arizona State at home. So, they lost to Arizona State on the road last week. So now they're at home against Cal. That's why they're a 16-point favorite. But as I've said, I think Cal is, Justin Wilcox is doing a really good job there. Great hire. They beat North Carolina on the road. They beat Ole Miss at home. They have played competitively against USC. They snapped a 7-game losing streak in the series in overtime last year to Clemson at home. I think this game definitely could be close. I'll take the 16, and I'll really have to think hard about the money line at plus 550. And one more money line play that I am considering, and that's Colorado at UCLA. UCLA favored by 7.5. UCLA is in big trouble. Moore is terrible. Their confidence level shot all of a sudden. They can't beat anybody. They're 1-5 against the spread in their last 6. Colorado, meanwhile, I do have to wonder about them following the loss against Washington. It wasn't a good one. They've dropped 3 straight covers this year. They did snap a 5-game losing streak last year to UCLA. They're getting plus 250 on a money line. That's tempting for me, plus the 8. So that's a game I'm definitely considering. I haven't decided yet, but I am considering going with Colorado. And that will wrap it up. Now, we are going to start posting up on the Ourlads.com website. We'll have it either later tonight or first thing in the morning. We're going to have our injury reports. We're going to do this every week. We're going to let you know the key injuries in college football that you need to keep an eye on. I've already mentioned some of them, but we'll post the rest and we will update them as best we can. And keep in mind when we post these are going to be basically what we know injuries, because you don't know a lot in college football. It's not like the NFL. It's kind of hard to find out really what happened. So we kind of go with what we know and also what we think is important, what matters. So if you don't see guys on our report, that means we don't think it matters as much. So those are some of the players that you'll see when we post the report later tonight, first thing tomorrow morning. And again, we'll do that every week as well. So that'll wrap it up for our show. And actually, that is it for our lads football shows for the week. We'll be back again on Monday for our lads Mondays. We'll wrap up the weekend at pro and college football. We'll have our fantasy segment with Jamal Murphy. And we will be talking, by the way, on the Prime Sports Radio Network in just a few minutes, some horse racing on the Prime Sports Radio Network for Prime Sports Horse Report. Don't forget to check out Ourlads.com for the best NFL and college football depth charts in the business. And also, you can send us you can send any messages our way through our tweets at PrimeSN. You can follow us on PrimeSN as well. So that'll do it. We'll see you next week. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the games. And thanks for tuning in to the Ourlads Football Radio Network. Tried to keep us all down and hope that we will never see the truth.